Hey, what is up you guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am really excited for today's video because today we are going to be talking about Princess Diana conspiracy theories, or more specifically just conspiracy theories around her death. This video has been on my to film list since I literally started my YouTube channel back in like May or June, I think, and I've never filmed it, but I thought with The Crown season 4 coming out and everyone kind of getting back into their obsession with her, it would be the perfect time to film it. So without further ado, let's just get right on into the video. I am going to be doing a little bit of background information on her, so if you've watched all the documentaries, read the books, and know what is happening, you can just skip to whatever time I put right here, which will jump you right into the conspiracy theories. So Princess Diana was originally born Diana Spencer to the 8th Earl of Spencer. Now, Princess Diana was originally born Diana Spencer. She was the 4th of 5 children to the 8th Earl of Spencer. Now, the Spencers, if you're looking at it in like olden times, how things were ranked, they would have considered a noble family. So they still had connections with the royal family. They did have ties to the royal family. Both of her grandmothers actually worked as lady-in-waitings to the queen, which is basically just assistants. And that's not like a regular job. Like, it's definitely not something on LinkedIn. You can't just apply for it. Like, you have to be somebody to work as that position. So their family was pretty high up within that spectrum. Diana had a really unhappy childhood. Her parents got divorced when she was 6, I believe, and this really hit Diana hard. She took it very hard. One of her earliest memories from her family was her father slapping her mother across the face. She said that her mom, it was routine for her to cry every single Saturday because she didn't want the children to go spend time with their father, and her father just kind of pretended nothing was going on. So she had a very unhappy childhood, and from a very young age, she was feeling very depressed, very lonely, definitely not in a great mental state. So Diana actually met Prince Charles while he was dating her older sister Sarah, which I know is like kind of grimy. Charles started to pursue Diana. He started asking her to go on walks with him, to go spend the weekend with him at this, I believe it was like a shooting or like a hunting place. And as they were being seen more and more together, it was becoming very public knowledge that they might be getting engaged. She might be the new princess, the next queen, and she was getting a lot of media attention. She constantly had the paparazzi following her on her way to work, on her way home from work, at her flat in London. She worked at a nursery, and they would follow her while she rode her bike there. They would follow her home. They would wait outside, and she said that there was just a constant like mob of paparazzis constantly following her. And it got to the point where she lived in a flat in London that her parents provided her with, and she had 3 roommates, and it got to the point where she felt like it was not fair to her roommates because there was just always people out there. So Charles at the time was 32, and he needed to be getting married at this point. When you're the next in line, you have the responsibility to be having children, so there is another person in the succession. He was already 32, and although that isn't that old to not be married, he needed to have at least 2 kids to have an heir and a spare. Diana was a really good candidate. She was young, which meant they probably were not going to have any trouble conceiving children, and she had never been in any previous relationships, so any scandals was not going to be an issue. Past relationship scandals was kind of an issue for Prince Charles because he had been in a relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, who was actually married at the time. So they wanted to make sure there wasn't going to be any scandals after they became married. So they ended up becoming engaged on February 6th of 1981.
One day you would, in all likelihood, be queen. It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
It is, but I've had a small run-up to it all in the last 6 months. And next to Prince Charles, I know I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
Can you take us back to when you first met? If you can remember. Can you remember when you first met?
Yes, certainly can. It was 1977. Prince Charles came to stay as a friend of my sister Sarah's for a shoot. We sort of met in a ploughed field.
Slightly previous to that, but I know.
And what did you think then? What was your instant impression, both of you? What did you think about Lady Diana?
Well, I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was. And, I mean, great fun. And bouncy and full of life and everything.
It was the fact that an older man who was in a prominent position liked me, wanted to have me around.
A man?
Yes.
A man was prepared to talk to me rather than a boy?
Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of that.
And I suppose in love.
Of course. Whatever in love means.
Yes. I was brought up in the sense that, you know, when you got engaged with someone, you loved them. And the most extraordinary thing is we had this ghastly interview the day we announced our engagement, and this ridiculous ITN man said, "Are you in love?" So I thought, what a thick question. So I said, yes, of course we are, in the sort of fat, stern ranger that I was. And Charles turned around and said, what ever in love means. And that threw me completely. I thought, what a strange question.
What a strange reply.
God, how does it traumatise me?
It's a pivotal moment.
And then got married on July 29th of 1981. So a really, really short engagement. And at the time, this would have made Diana 20 when they got married and Charles 34. Their wedding was a huge, huge event. 750 million people watched the live broadcast. I believe for Harry and Meghan, 1 billion people watched it, but that included like the Twitter streams, the YouTube streams, not just the original live broadcast. It was a huge, huge thing. It was kind of like the beak of happiness that the UK really needed. Everyone just became very, very infatuated with it. So an interesting little tidbit that I wanted to add about their wedding that I think kind of gives you a little bit of an insight of the kind of person Diana was. Royal weddings are typically very traditional, and they typically always do traditional vows, and Diana said that she did not want to do that, and they actually both wrote their own vows, and one of the main parts that Diana cut out of it is that she would obey Charles. Also, another interesting thing, William and Kate also decided to write their own vows, but Harry and Meghan did not, which I think is really interesting. But with Diana and Charles' wedding, this seemed to really take off the Queen. She is very traditional, and I guess this is just not something that she really agreed with. So this is just kind of the first little thing that we see from Diana, that she is not like the typical royal family. She is not going to be the perfect little image that they want her to be. And as I said earlier, the Queen and Prince Philip are both extremely, extremely traditional, especially with race. He was just not a nice person, and they were very, very old-fashioned. So someone like Diana was just not super well received into the royal family. So as you guys probably know, Diana and Charles did not get off to a great start. They never really had a great relationship, and I believe through their entire marriage, him and Camilla were completely involved. And like I said, she was married at this time too.
You may recall seeing a picture of me sobbing in a red coat when he went off on his aeroplane. That was nothing to do with him going. The most awful thing had happened before he went. I was in his study talking to him about his trip. The telephone rang. It was Camilla. Just before he was going for 5 weeks. So I thought, shall I be nice or shall I just sit here? So I thought I'd be nice, so I left them to it. And it just broke my heart though.
That did not stop her from being involved. She was a complete humanitarian while she was a part of the royal family and while she was not a part of the royal family, and she definitely did things that were perceived as very different. She talked a lot about mental health even while she was a part of the royal family. She talked about her and her husband's marriage and how that affected her bulimia. She talked a lot about bulimia.
Eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, show how an individual can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves.
A lot about mental health, a lot about self-harm, a lot about suicide. And even now, that's not a super normal thing to talk about, especially when you're talking about it with yourself. And she was very, very open with it. She also did a lot with HIV and AIDS awareness. And at the time in the 80s and the 90s, HIV was really, really big, and it had a huge stigma around it. It was actually called GRID, which is like gay-related immune deficiency. That's what they called it for a while, and she was the first person in the royal family to publicly touch a person with AIDS.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. It's always been my concern to touch people with leprosy, trying to show in a simple action that they are not reviled, nor are we repulsed.
She would shake their hands, she would give them hugs, and this was like pretty scandalous at the time because people wouldn't even operate on people with AIDS because they didn't know how it was transmitted. Like, some people were scared you could get it through sweat glands. Obviously you cannot. And again, this was associated with gay people, and that was not perceived super well at the time either. She was just kind of doing things that didn't align with the perfect image of the royal family. As you guys probably know, she was loved by the people from very, very early on into their engagement and their marriage. People were not infatuated with Charles. They did not care about Charles. They cared about Diana. They would line up to see Diana. They wanted to shake Diana's hand. It was nothing to do with him, and I think a reason why she was so loved worldwide is because she was so relatable. I think so many women struggle with eating disorders and self-harm and suicidal thoughts and depression, and even now, but especially at that time, it was just not talked about, especially from women. And I think that she just seemed like such a normal person to everyone. In my opinion, I think that that's why she was beloved by the people, but I was not alive through that time, so I really don't know. My mom absolutely adored her. I definitely think that that was the reason like why my mom loved her so much.
She had this incredible ability, which he's kind of inherited, and I told him that, and he said, thanks very much, to make people feel at ease and make them feel that everything's going to be all right.
So another thing that kind of made the Queen and the royal family just a little bit more angsty towards her, I don't really know how to word that, is the way that she was with William and Harry. She was a very, very hands-on mom, which isn't super typical for the royal family. I don't know if it's the same way now, but definitely back then it wasn't. I know that she breastfed them, which was like considered weird. She was very persistent that they go to public school, at least for a little bit, which I think is like incredible that she was like, we humbling them. Like, as you should. I remember there was something that was like at William's kindergarten Parents' Day. They had a race and Diana's skirt like came above her knees, which was like such a big issue, but she did win the race, again, as she should. So Diana was very aware that they did not like her. She said in an interview that she knew she was never going to become queen because they just weren't gonna let her.
Do you think you'll ever be queen?
No, I don't. No.
Why do you think that?
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country. I don't think many people would want me to be queen. Actually, when I say many people, I mean the establishment that I'm married into, because they've decided that I'm a non-starter.
Why do you think they've decided that?
Because I do things differently, because I don't go by a rule book, because I lead from the heart, not the head. And albeit that's got me into trouble in my work, I understand that. But someone's got to go out there and love people and show it.
And do you think that because of the way you behave, that's precluded you effectively from becoming queen?
Yes, well, not precluded me, I wouldn't say that. I just don't think I have as many supporters in that environment than I did. Yeah.
You mean within the royal household?
Mm-hmm. They see me as a threat of some kind, and I'm here to do good.
So you're being what, pushed by family?
Yeah, my family looked great, and so did my friends, and so did Charles's family. They liked me. They were very good to me when I was a guest.
What does that mean?
We used to change when I was a daughter, and the positions changed.
And as I said before, their marriage was kind of a shit show, for lack of a better term, and it got to the point where they weren't even really married anymore, other than just the piece of paper. They were both in other relationships. Prince Philip had written letters to her about how he disapproved of her relationship, despite the fact that his son had been also having another relationship with someone who was married, but that's besides the point. And then eventually the Queen wrote to them and said that she advised them to get a divorce. And I believe that the way that this kind of works is that she was the one who was going to decide that they were going to get divorced, and as soon as she gave the okay, they could do it. She did end up writing a letter to them saying that she advised for them to get divorced. Then in 1996, they were officially divorced.
Soldier, get out the way. Pretty boy coming through.
She was allowed to keep her title Diana, Princess of Wales, and the Queen was going to let her keep Your Royal Highness because the Queen was like, she is the mother to the future king. However, Charles was very, very adamant that she no longer get that title, and William actually said to her, or this is like rumored, obviously there's no proof, but said to her after they got divorced that when he was king he would give her title back, which is so cute. So after they were divorced, Diana continued with her humanitarian work and began a relationship with a man named Dodi Al-Fayed, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. So Dodi was the son to an Egyptian man named Muhammad Al-Fayed. They are an extremely wealthy family. He was extremely wealthy. Muhammad, Dodi's father, actually met Diana before Dodi and basically said to her that his son and her would be a great couple. He really saw them hitting it off, so he invited Diana, William, and Harry to go on to his yacht with them, and he played a little matchmaker. There was a biography written about Diana, and this is in the biography, but who knows if it's real or if it's correct. But apparently while they were on this yacht, Dodi dropped a piece of fruit and Diana picked it up and chucked it at him, which he returned, and then it like broke out into a food fight between them. And then they chased each other around the yacht and just started like wrestling until they stopped and looked in each other's eyes. And I don't know if that actually happened, but if it did, that is like the cutest thing I've ever heard. So there are different opinions when it comes to Diana and Dodi's relationship. Some people believe that this was the happiest Diana ever was. Some people believe that she was just using him to get over this cardiovascular surgeon that she was apparently in love with and had just broken up with. Who really knows, but this was the relationship that she was in at the time. So Dodi and Diana's relationship was a hot topic. The first paparazzi person to sell a photo of them kissing became a millionaire from that photo. So their relationship went for big bucks with the paparazzi. The paparazzi in her life was an even bigger presence now than it was when she was part of the royal family. Well, I guess she still technically is a part of the royal family, but when she was married to Charles. So then on August 31st of 1997, Diana and Dodi were dining at the famous Paris Ritz Hotel, and it was a big night with the paparazzi. It was actually rumored that Dodi was going to be proposing to Diana. People were saying that they saw jewelers going up to his hotel, that he was looking at rings, blah blah blah. So tonight, more than ever, the paparazzi were everywhere, and Diana and Dodi ended up actually trying to go out the back door, but there were people out there too, so they alerted the rest of the paparazzi and they were just like swarmed. So they wanted to get out of that hotel and get back to Dodi's, I believe it was either his apartment or where he was staying at the time, which was only a few miles away from the hotel. So at 11:30 they got into the Mercedes car that they were driving. It was Diana, Dodi, Diana's bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, and the driver, Henri Paul. So then at 12:19, the Mercedes crashed into the 13th pillar of the Pont de Lama bridge. I'm definitely saying that wrong. I'll put what it's called on the screen and a picture of it, of course. So this crash was horrific. The car was completely destroyed. It was estimated that they were going about 65 miles per hour. Henri Paul broke his neck on impact. He was the driver and was killed instantly. Dodi was also pronounced dead at the scene. So then Diana and Trevor were the only ones alive when the ambulance arrived there. There was also a doctor who was just stopped by the accident who came out trying to help. Trevor, the bodyguard, does not remember really anything from this accident. The only thing he remembers is that Diana was still aware of what was happening and she was like moaning and crying and calling out for Dodi, but that's literally all he remembers from the accident. And I believe it took them 45 minutes just to get them out of the car. While this was all happening, the paparazzi were literally insane. They of course flooded to the car, and some of them were actually climbing on top of it trying to take pictures of them inside the car, literally like while these people were dying, just climbing all over it. They eventually did get them out of the car and put her in the ambulance. Now, I know in the UK and in the United States, procedure is you get to the hospital as fast as you can. Work can be done on you in the ambulance, but your main priority is to get to the hospital. But in France, it's actually the opposite. They have a full team of medical professionals in the ambulance, including a doctor, and they work on you in the ambulance. It's more present to get you worked on as soon as possible than to bring you to the hospital. So the first kind of odd thing involving the crash is that none of them were wearing seatbelts, which was kind of odd just because Diana she's the most photographed woman in the world, I believe, still to this day. And there are multiple pictures of her wearing a seatbelt. However, I personally think that this isn't that big of a deal. I feel like it would be very, very likely for you to be in a rush trying to get away from the paparazzi to just forget to like snap on your seatbelt. So I don't think that that's a big piece to the puzzle. Another weird thing that happened was that the doctor in the ambulance actually ordered the ambulance to stop while they were only about a minute away from the hospital. They literally like could see it. Basically, you could touch it, like you could run to it, and he actually ordered them to stop the ambulance because her injuries had gotten so bad. Now, this is where I think the whole French protocol gets a little bit odd because Diana had coded in the car. She'd gone into cardiac arrest at the scene while she was still in the vehicle. So even if you're going to work on her in the ambulance, like, wouldn't you still want to bring her to the hospital? Like, you can work on people in an ambulance and still drive it at the same time. I believe it was only 6 miles from the accident to the hospital, but it took them between an hour and a half and an hour and 45 minutes to get her to the hospital. So Diana was obviously rushed into surgery right away, but they actually said that she only had a concussion and a broken arm, I believe. So Prince Charles was actually planning on going to Paris and seeing her because that doesn't sound like death-threatening injuries, but Diana had severe internal bleeding, which caused her to go into cardiac arrest at the scene, which I'm just gonna stick in my little tidbit again. This is why, the main reason why I think the French protocol for emergency accidents like this is the way that it is, because I don't think there's like a surefire way to tell that you have internal bleeding unless you're at the hospital. So like, I just think that is so stupid, and that's like such a common thing that can happen to you with like impact situations like this. So they ended up spending 2 hours on Diana in surgery, but at about 4 a.m. she was pronounced dead. I think this is the third sketchy thing we've gotten to that happened, and in my opinion, this is by far the weirdest thing that they did. Is as soon as Diana was pronounced dead, they embalmed her body. And if you don't know what embalming is, it's basically just like shooting a body up with formaldehyde to preserve them for an open casket. Now, the reason why this is so weird, first of all, it's illegal in France to embalm a body like without permission. The whole process of them embalming the body was illegal. 2, I don't know about in France, if anybody knows, please let me know, but in the US, you don't embalm bodies at the hospital unless there's like a morgue, like a full-on morgue in the hospital, I believe. It's just very odd. And they actually embalmed her while her body was still warm, and it only takes about 10 to 20 minutes for a body to lose its energy and its heat. I wonder if they embalmed her in the operating room, because to take her down from wherever she was operating on to the morgue to embalm her, like, there's the chances of those being super close together on the hospital aren't that big. So I wonder if they like full on just embalmed her in the operating room. The reason, I feel like I've said like the reason so many times, but the reason why this has become such a big conspiracy is because you can't test if someone is pregnant early on in their pregnancy after they have been embalmed, which we will get into. And they couldn't even really find out like how she had died. Like, they knew from her internal injuries, but if they wouldn't have embalmed her, like an autopsy and blood tests and the whole 9 yards would have been done on her. Like, she is a princess. She was one of the most famous people in the world at that time. Now, a theory, I didn't read this up online, but I definitely think that it is something to consider, is once you're embalmed, like, they're not going to do an autopsy on you. They're not going to look into your body. Like, they really can't. So I think it's very possible that the doctors, I'm I don't want to throw shade, but like the doctors, if they made a mistake, like I said, she's one of the most important people in the world. If they were scared of getting sued or getting their license taken away or the hospital getting sued, I wonder if they embalmed her to like cover up anything that they would have done, even if it wasn't anything big. The possibilities of them getting sued if they made a mistake on this woman was astronomically high. So I feel like that is a reason, but the test for pregnancy is also another really big conspiracy out there of why they embalmed her. So another weird thing involving this accident is within 3 hours, the entire accident had been cleaned up. Traffic was running through it again, and they really didn't do a lot of evidence tests. There is a lot of reasons why I think this is weird. I understand that in like a typical regular traffic accident, you clean up the traffic to continue traffic moving through. Like, you don't want to hold up the traffic, like you want to get it in and out. However, this wasn't typical. This was Princess Diana and the son to one of the richest men in the world at that time. Plus, it was at nighttime, so traffic wouldn't have been as bad. They would have had more time between rush hour, and I believe in France, the typical workday doesn't start till 10, as with like ours starts from like 8 or 9. So they would have had even longer than like what I'm thinking typical rush hour is in the US. So why they didn't do more at the accident, like I just think that's really weird of like why they cleaned it up. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Paris, so I don't know how inconvenient it would be for this bridge to be closed. I can't imagine if like Michelle Obama was killed in a car accident like this, that 3 hours later people were driving on that same street. I don't know. Is that normal? Like, would that happen? I don't know. Let's get into the first theory, which is that the car that they were using was tampered with. So the car that they had was actually the only car at the rental place that they could have rented out, and not just the make and model of that car, the only car they could have gotten. And it was rumored that that was a stolen car and was then bought by the rental place. However, I don't remember where I found that piece of information, and I don't know if that is credible, so take it with a grain of salt. Honestly, all of the conspiracies, let's just say this really quick, take with a grain of salt. As with many conspiracies, they are strummed out of nothing. They are picking up straws. So take them all with a grain of salt. So there was also apparently a missing microchip that in the car that controlled the power steering, the braking, the acceleration, and the navigation. Another weird thing about this is despite the fact that there were so many traffic cameras from the time that they left the hotel to where they crashed at that bridge, there was none of them that worked. None of them. And another really weird thing about this is that traffic cameras aren't just for accidents, they're for tickets, which is revenue for your roads. So that's why we have them, that's why they're working. And the fact that none of them were working is just super, super odd. So another thing that I wanted to add is that the paparazzi were straight up the ones considered at fault here. I believe 7 of them were arrested on the scene, 3 of them were arrested a couple days later, and they were charged with involuntary manslaughter, but those charges ended up being dropped, and there were only a handful of them who got charged with invasion of privacy, and their penalty was paying a fine of like €1. It was literally nothing, like change. So obviously one of the biggest conspiracies is that the royal family was involved in this or had something to do with this, and Dodi and Diana were rumored to have been getting married, and it was also rumored that Diana was pregnant at the time, which I think makes a lot of sense for why they would have been getting married, because I feel like it would have been kind of like tea if she'd gotten pregnant and they didn't get married at all. And not only did the royal family not like Diana, but Dodi was actually an Egyptian Muslim. Like I said, the royal family is very traditional, very white, and very Protestant. So her marrying someone that was Muslim and Egyptian was kind of not the norm for them, and not only was he just marrying her, but he would have been becoming William and Harry's stepfather, and he would have been Muslim. And then if she would have converted to Muslim, would the children want to? It was just like a whole big deal. So a lot of people think that is a possible reason for why they wanted to. And this is also another thing with the embalming, because if she was pregnant, there is no way to tell now because they embalmed her body. Another theory is that the car actually collided with another car. It was a white Sony Uno, I believe it was called. this car was at the accident. The police have confirmed that, but they've never found it. They have no idea who was driving it, so it's kind of like a piece of evidence that just led to a dead end. So, like I said earlier, Diana was very, very paranoid about the royal family. It kind of reminds me of like Abraham Lincoln, because the days leading up into her death, she was super, super paranoid. Her bodyguard said, it was either her bodyguard or her butler, I think it was her butler, said that she would like check outlets, check her bags, like she wanted to make sure people weren't listening to her. After they got divorced, the queen offered for her to keep all of her same bodyguards, and she said no, because she thought that they would just be like reporting everything that she did back to the royal family. And she actually said like she herself thought it was Charles, that like she was going to die in a car accident and it was going to be Charles, like something was going to happen to her and it would be Charles's fault. And one of the main reasons why she believed this is because she was actually having an affair with one of her bodyguards while they were still married, I believe. And he ended up actually getting into a motorcycle accident. And this was like right after the affair came out, right after he got fired. And she thought that someone had went out to kill him. However, I do want to say the person who collided with him stopped right away, got out, like tried to help. It seemed like a routine traffic accident, but I thought it was important to mention. So getting into one of the biggest parts of the case is that the driver, Henri Paul, actually had a blood alcohol level that was extremely high. I think it was a 1.74, which is 3.5 times the legal limit in France, which is equivalent to about 2.2 times the legal limit in the UK and the United States and Canada, I believe. However, all of the paparazzi, everyone who had seen him, said that night that he seemed fine. He didn't seem like he was completely out of his mind. I mean, to have that much alcohol in your system, like he would have definitely been feeling it. And everyone said that he seemed completely sober. So after this blood test came out that he had had so much alcohol in his system, his family immediately said, like, this is incorrect, this is wrong, do another blood test. They did another blood test, and I believe it actually came up higher that time. I think it was 1.75, which is the same, pretty much. So they really didn't know what to take by this, and they think, I believe it's his family who came up with this theory, that his blood, or the blood samples that they were using, were not his blood. And another reason is because there were so many different drugs found in his blood. Another thing that I want to say is everything that I say with Henri's autopsy reports and blood samples, take with a grain of salt, because there's not an official document for his autopsy or the blood results listed on the internet that I could find anyway, so a lot of things are different. However, I do know that his blood alcohol level was a 1.74. So I'm just gonna read off the drugs that they found in his system. There was a drug found in his system called albendazole, which is used to treat tapeworms, and he was not prescribed to that. It is a prescription medication. He was prescribed to a drug, apparently, allegedly, called acampostate. I'll put them all up here because I'm not good with pronunciation, which is used to treat alcoholism. So this is not looking good for the conspiracy theorists. There is also another source that I found said that they found Prozac and Typridol. Another source that I found said that the autopsy report showed that he had been on Prozac since May and Typedinol, I think it's called, since June. Prozac is an antidepressant, and the Typedinol is used to treat behavioral disorders and can be given to treat aggression due to alcoholism. So obviously all of these reports are showing that Henri was an alcoholic and completely out of his mind the night that they crashed. However, he was not a known alcoholic to his family, which I guess you can keep a secret, but it was like, I don't know, I definitely feel like this leads me to believe that there's not much a conspiracy around here. It leads me to believe that this guy was just drunk, but I don't know. What do you guys think? None of this stuff might be correct. The blood alcohol, I know for a fact, like, is what is officially stated. The drugs, I don't know. So, you know what, let's just let that marinate for a second, and let's just let it go and get into our next theory. Oh, just kidding, we're not done with Henri. So okay, now I know where the conspiracy comes from. So the conspiracy comes from that they found high levels of carbon monoxide in his system. However, he broke his neck, which would have led him to completely die on impact as soon as the car hit the pillar. And obviously when you die, you don't breathe anymore, so there was no reason that he would have had carbon monoxide in his lungs unless there was carbon monoxide coming from the car into the driver's seat, like carbon monoxide coming from the engine, I guess I want to say, into the interior of the car. So either the car was tampered with and there was carbon monoxide poisoning them in the interior, or these tests from whatever body these tests are from was not Henri's body, because it doesn't make sense for him to have carbon monoxide in his body after the crash. So that's where the theory stems from. Now I'm understanding it. Okay. Now let's let that theory sizzle. So another theory is that the MI5 or MI6 was assassinating Diana, and that is basically just the equivalent in the US to the Secret Service in the UK. So another theory that kind of involves Henri is that he was, so to speak, the suicide bomber of this assassination, and he was like the insider who was going to play out this assassination, which does kind of make sense because he was not originally supposed to work this night. He only came in to drive Diana, and he was the head of security at the Ritz Hotel, which is why he was driving her. He was apparently making a lot more money than what he would have been making as just a head of security, which could have been a result of him working for the MI5 or the MI6. So this theory kind of stems from that a couple rogue members of the MI5 thought that Dodi was going to convert Diana and then Diana would convert her children to Muslim, and that's why they killed her. So a retired officer from the MI6 actually came out and said that he worked on assassinations for the MI6 and he had saw a plan from the 80s that was to assassinate some other world leader, and it was almost identical to Diana's crash. And the reason why these were so similar is because they both were struck by a big light, which brings us into the big light theory, which is just that at the time of the crash, there was apparently this huge bright light that everyone saw, but no one really knows where it came from. I think that this is kind of a stretch. I don't really know where they got this. It's a major city. I feel like huge lights and unexplained things happen in places like that all the time because there's just so much going on at once. So I don't know if I necessarily believe that theory. I feel like that's kind of stroked from nothing. This agent actually ended up retracting his statement that the MI6 planned to kill her. Another former agent from the MI6 named John Hopkins, not the John Hopkins we know and love, came forward and said that he worked on 23 assassination cases, and one of them was Princess Diana's. He said that the reasons why they wanted to assassinate her is because of her possible pregnancy and the work that she was going to be doing with landmines and how she was going to be speaking on behalf of the Palestinians. Apparently the UK was just not for that and would just not let that happen. That is why they had to take her out. And then that brings us to our last theory, which is that the crash was actually to kill Dodi and Princess Diana was just kind of collateral damage. I think that if someone did try to assassinate them, that is the most likely theory, that the crash was either made for Dodi and Diana was collateral damage, or the crash was made for Diana and Dodi was collateral damage. So that is all the theories I have for you today, guys. I just want to apologize. I feel like this video was a little bit all over the place. It's my first conspiracy theory video ever, and it might be my last. So let me know you guys' thoughts. Let me know what theories make the most sense to you, which ones you think are the most realistic to have happened. I personally think that if this was not just a routine traffic accident, that a lot of these theories kind of intertwined make a lot of sense. I definitely think it makes sense for the MI6 or the MI5 to kill her. I think we're not aware how many people die from an accident that are actually assassinated, and I feel like that would kind of make sense of why she was so paranoid if they were the ones keeping tabs on her. I don't necessarily think that the royal family did it. I don't think they liked her. I don't think they agreed with anything she did, but I don't know if they really had a reason to kill her, you know? So let me know you guys' thoughts. I've been filming for an hour, so let's hope this video isn't an hour long. Let me know if you guys liked it. Let me know what I can do to improve videos like this. Make sure you give it a big thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you like content like this, because I make at least 2 videos a week, sometimes 3 if I have time. And that's all I have to say. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video.